Hello, this will be The Body of Christopher Creed, Chapter 10. I sat in the police station with my mom on one side of me and Allie on the other. I remember being glad that my dad had been working that night. You don't know how your parents are going to react to trouble if you've never been in any. My mom was totally blank as those cops took me away in the cop car. They had told me I could come down in her car. They just wanted to question me, but I muttered, I don't mind, because somehow the cop car seemed a better deal than having my guilt seated next to my mom in a closed-in car. I wish she would have gone ballistic, though. My mom had never gone ballistic that I could remember, but I had never done anything like this before either. There were 2 other rooms in the police station, and I could hear hollering coming out of both of them. In one, Bo was saying, You're wrong. I don't have to answer your stupid questions, and I don't have to talk to you about anything. I want a lawyer. Chief Bowen's voice came back at him. I guess you've been in here often enough to know the law, Richardson. To get a lawyer at this point in the game, you have to pay for one. Don't forget who you are, a big mouth with a record, with one foot in Egg Harbor and another foot on a banana peel. Aw, kiss my ass. Don't you? A thunder of chairs clatter made the building shake, almost. And Chief Bowen's voice cut in at the end of it. Ever talk to me like that? 2 younger officers charged out of the other room, which Mrs. Creed was in, and shot past us into the room where Bo and Chief Bowen were. Allie shot out of her seat, and I grabbed her by the back of the jeans and jerked her down beside me again. She had been crying, and now added to the mess with louder sobs. I couldn't take her sobs. I shot up out of my chair toward the room with Bo, and my mother jerked me back down like I had done with Allie. Mom, they're beating him up, I cried. No, they're not. Stay calm, both of you. I looked at her sitting there tensely as the yelling and furniture clanging continued. And from the other room, Mrs. Creed's voice blasted. He either murdered my son or he's holding my son. If you let him go tonight, I'll sue you for... You're a liar, Bo's voice thundered, and my mom reached over me and grabbed Allie, who was screeching with her head in her lap. How can you say they're not beating him? I pleaded with her. They're yelling, mostly. They yanked him out of the chair, and the chair fell over. Then he kicked the chair, and then one of the other officers tripped over the chair. How do you know? I asked. These noises are my life. She stared at the door, too calm. How can you let them talk to him like that? I demanded. They're the police. They're trashing him. Tori. She cut me off and did not look thrilled. I don't have time right now to give you a lesson in juvenile delinquency. Nobody is beating him, all right? There's just a language that these kids understand, and if you don't use it, you might as well speak French to them. They're just doing what cops do. Mom, just do what lawyers do. Please, do something for him, I mumbled, and I could feel myself starting to fall. Would you care to tell me what happened tonight? She snapped. We're in some trouble, I stammered. I wasn't born yesterday, she muttered, her jaw barely moving, like she was trying not to be overheard. This looks like some chapter from my office files. Only problem is, my son is in it. What is going on? Mom. I heard Bo scream out the word liar again as the cops hollered for him to shut up. Mom, please trust me. You gotta help that kid in there. He's innocent. Innocent of what? Her mouth didn't move again, but the tone of her voice was totally pissed. Mrs. Creed wants the cops to pin Chris on him. He didn't do anything, okay? You have to believe me and help him. He's a boon, so they're being mean to him. She jumped a little in her chair to let me know I had said enough. Do you know anything about that kid in there, Tori? She muttered again. I don't care if he's from Guadalajara. They're not picking on him because of where he's from, but because he's got a record as long as your arm. I have personally seen that kid in court 5 or 6 times. Did you know that? For what? I asked, feeling my stomach sink through the floor. You name it. Breaking and entering, mostly. Mom, he's stupid about it. He's not cut out to be a thief. That's why he keeps getting caught. She jumped around again, then cleared her throat, smiling at Chief Bowen's deputy, who went back to Mrs. Creed's little room, shouting, Mrs. Creed, Chief Bowen says you have to calm down. You are being very stupid right now, young man, my mom said. I might be a lawyer. First, I'm your mother. As your mother, I'm telling you, this is not the type of person to whom we expect you to endear yourself, considering we are paying $5,000 a year in property taxes to send you to Steepleton High School. My brain leaped to Allie's house and Beau, stomping up those stairs like it was nothing. I thought of him standing on the curb with me, talking about his sister Darla and Allie. He had to have so much courage just to live his life. He saved Allie. I didn't really care about the rest. I shut my eyes tight as Chief Bowen kept nabbing at Beau. Look, forget Egg Harbor. Forget the juvenile delinquent slumber party up there. You want to go to Jamesburg, Richardson? You got one foot in real jail, mister. You have pushed us and pushed us for years. I'm not arrested, Richardson spouted back. You can't send me to Jamesburg. And because I'm telling you I did not break into that woman's house. I don't know what happened to her dorky kid. But I'll bet you she does. Richardson, when you go to the chair, I'm pulling the switch. Mrs. Creed's voice dive-bombed the place from across the hall. I almost pissed myself again at the sound of her voice. I shut my eyes and thought, God, do something here, because I can't cope with all this by myself. Allie was wailing, Mrs. Creed was screeching, and my mom was talking about her taxes. Mom stood up. She looked too calm and too slow in this storm. She turned and looked me dead in the eye and said, You need to do two things. Stay calm and keep her calm. She did not look thrilled, and she said it like it was a military order. I reached down and bodily picked Allie up from her heap on the floor, dumping her back in the chair and keeping both arms around her so she wouldn't slither down again. I kept muttering, shh, to Allie as my mom walked toward the door to the room where Beau and Chief Bowen were. The door was open about halfway. Guys, she said in a calm voice that stopped Chief Bowen, are you going to charge this boy with something or not? What are you doing here, Susan? Chief Bowen asked. He sounded annoyed. Oh, that's right. We got your son out there. Mrs. Hofstetter saw him out her bay window, standing in front of the McDermotts, having a cigarette with this outstanding citizen here. I wasn't smoking, climbed halfway up my throat, but in a haze, excuse me, I realized that being accused of smoking was a fart in a windstorm. My brain flashed back to that flickering curtain at the house next door to the Creeds. I hadn't even registered that somebody was watching us. Stupid. I hoped I could straighten it out later. Are they being charged or not? My mother's voice was edgy. What's your game, Susan? Chief Bowen asked. Are you representing one or both or neither of these young men? I think it's against the law to represent your own son. I'll have to check that one out. I'm not representing anyone, she said as casually as she could. I just want to know how I can help get a move on here. It's late, and these kids have school tomorrow. I heard Chief Bowen sigh loudly. Bring your son in here, Susan, and the McDermott girl. I don't want your son to miss his bedtime. Tiny, take Mr. Richardson out, and please keep him away from Sylvia. Tiny was like a 250-pound officer. We passed him and Beau in the doorway, and it was a squeeze. Beau just stared at the floor with those insane-looking black eyes, but I could see fear in them. It was coming across like machine gun fire to Chief Bowen, but I knew he was just as scared as I was, or more scared. I noticed he still didn't have his shoes on. He must have been caught right there in the street. I could feel my mom's fingers pushing me in the back. I had won something with her. I just wasn't sure how much. Like my mom had predicted, there was a chair turned over. I turned it upright and sat in it. Allie edged into the chair beside me, and my mom sat beside Chief Bowen on the other side of the table. He looked from me to Allie, back to me again. That kid out there is not the type of person your parents would want you associating with, he said. It was my turn to go crazy. I slumped back in the chair, then leaned forward again, pushing Allie, who was hollering that they didn't know the first thing about him. You know, everybody has their own little version of reality going here, I yelled, and it has nothing to do with what's true or not. Tori, my mom hollered, staring at the table, remain calm. I dropped back in the chair and began rubbing Allie's back, not caring that I was sniffing. This is an insanity fest, I muttered. This is crazy, and it's not all Beau. You see this? Chief Bowen picked up a huge file that was sitting in front of him. It's 20 pages long, and it's Richardson's file. He's a thief and a liar and an upstart. It's obvious from this file that he's not particularly good At thieving. Lying, I would say he's an ace. Now, there was a very unusual phone call made to the Creeds tonight. If you kids know something about that, and something about the disappearance of Chris Creed, and you are protecting Mr. Richardson. Bo doesn't know anything, Allie whined. None of us does. Well, somebody made that phone call to the Creeds tonight, and I'm praying that it wasn't either of you, he said, eyeing Allie, then me. His voice got sort of friendly. Whoever made that phone call is in serious trouble. Somebody either knows where Chris Creed is or they've committed a harassment crime that takes the grossest form of mental cruelty. The Creeds have lost a child. Their pain and suffering are not to be understood by you, but that doesn't mean a judge wouldn't understand it. If the caller was perceived as a spoiled little rich kid, that family could pay quite a bit. Don't count on having any money to go to college with, and that just covers the penalty for harassment. The caller asked for money. That's extortion. Extortion is a very serious crime, far more serious than harassment. Extortion has sent a number of kids to Jamesburg. Skip Egg Harbor, do not pass go. I got this hope that he was exaggerating the truth to scare us. I shot a glance at my mom. She just sat frozen in the chair like she was determined not to show any emotion. I couldn't read anything from her at all. Extortion? Jail? No college? I couldn't even get my brain to consider the words that were banging through my head. So, Chief Bowen leaned into the table and spoke in a low voice. This is critical. I need you two to tell me that the caller wasn't either of you. The peaceful grin on his face floated in front of my eyes. Something about it was making my stomach knot up. Allie broke in with a shaky voice. What makes you think it was any of us? He cleared his throat. Normally in this type of situation, it's me asking the questions, not you, he said softly, jerking his eyes toward the door like the other officers might hear him. But I'm not out to make criminals out of the kids my children were raised with, all right? He leaned in like he was telling us some big secret and doing us a huge favor. I got a call from the Creeds about an hour ago. They were calling from the ball field and said Sylvia had just taken a phone call for them to go there. The caller was supposed to give them some information about Chris and told her not to call the police. When they got to the ball field, no one was there. They called me from their car phone. I sent Tiny to check out the ball field and told them I would meet them at their house. I pulled up right behind them, and the Richardson kids were coming across the street toward your house, Allie. He was out of breath. He's not from these parts. He sat up straight, took a deep breath, then leaned into us again. Now I can't help it if the two of you have decided that he holds some sort of charm. We think it was a little suspicious that a kid with a record 9 miles long is in the neighborhood just when all this is happening. He denies having broken in. He could be lying. He could have broken in. Mrs. Hofstetter, the elderly lady who lives next door to the Creeds, came out and said she saw Tori and Bo Richardson come out of your house and stand on the curb, Allie. They were having a conversation and staring at the Creeds' house. Was anything missing? My mother asked. Sylvia doesn't think so. We think the kid probably wanted to break in and didn't have enough time. He was either running back from the ball field or looking for a way to break in and wasn't finding it. Their other 2 children claim not to have seen or heard anything. So breaking and entering is not an issue. But this phone call is. So please, tell me it wasn't either of you. He looked that way again, kind of smiling. I got his message this time and almost got sick. What, you want us to pin it on him? I jerked my thumb at the door. Chief Bowen's eyes widened a little, but his little smirk didn't disappear. I want you to tell me it wasn't you. I stared at him, trying to tell myself I was dreaming this. I was reading him wrong. He wanted us to say it was Bo, even if it wasn't true, just so his kids' best friends would be off the hook, just so he wouldn't put his friends, my mom and Mrs. McDermott, through anything. That smirky grin on his face didn't change. Something came screaming up my throat along the lines of, you can go F yourself, and my mom must have sensed it coming. Tori? She stood up and her chair flew backward, making both me and Allie jump. She swallowed and looked from Chief Bowen back to me again, shaking her head. He's not answering any questions here and now, Daryl. I'm sorry. Chief Bowen was slightly overweight. The roll of flesh around his collar turned bright red. Susan, please don't do this. I'm only trying to... I know. I appreciate it. But she looked at me hard, like, keep quiet. You're too young to understand, you moron. Daryl, I want to speak to you in private. Chief Bowen waved us out, staring at the table. I backed out, watching their faces the whole time. My mom wasn't looking at me. I think she was ashamed of herself or something. Out in the hall, I saw Bo sitting in one of the chairs in the row, studying the floor. I sat down next to him, and Allie sat on the other side. She was still crying, and he wrapped his arms around her. Mrs. Creed was wailing, and the deputy stuck his head in the door and yelled at her to calm down. Bo muttered, "You guys, you have to let me take the fall for this." "Why?" I demanded in a whisper. "Because at some point they will question you, and you will never hold up. You've never been in trouble before, and I have. And besides, they're going to pin Creed on me. I'm going down anyway." "It's nowhere near that bad," I muttered. "They can't. My mom will help you." "Yeah, right," he laughed. After a minute, he kissed Allie on the side of the head and got up. He marched in on my mom and Chief Bowen without even knocking. They both blew him a few lines of grief, but he just shut the door. I couldn't hear a word they were saying. A phone rang, and I heard Chief Bowen talking loudly. I sat there helpless, thinking Bo was confessing or something. I was afraid to charge the door and stop him for fear that wasn't what he was doing. I just sat there, comforting Allie, thinking whatever happened, I could straighten it out with my mom later. A few minutes later, my mother came out. "Come on," she said. "I'm taking you two home." I stood up, but Allie grabbed both sides of her chair like she was glued there. I realized my mom had said you two and not you three. My mom tried to pull her up by the arm, but Allie kept crying out that he was a sweet person, and my mom didn't even try one of those speeches on her about being stupid. "He's not going to Jamesburg, I promise," my mom said. She crossed her heart as Allie froze, watching her suspiciously. "So why can't he leave with us?" she sniffed. "Are they charging him with something?" "Juvenile delinquency." My mom put a hand on Allie's shoulder and explained quickly before Allie could freak. "Before you came out of your house tonight, he gave the police a hard time. He shoved an officer he thought was trying to search him illegally, though the officer was just trying to steer him to the— I know I was watching out the window." Allie sniffed some more. "At this point, they're very tired of his lack of respect. He'll have to be released to his mother or some other responsible party." Allie let out a sick laugh when she heard his mother referred to as a responsible party. My mother just went on. "So this is not serious and not directly related to Chris Creed. We don't have to worry about that tonight." I didn't like the tonight part, though I thought it may have gone over Allie's head. I also remembered Bo talking about his mom going on these 5-day binges, and I hoped she was around tonight. My mom patted Allie's back, watching her in a mysterious way. "You really like that boy in there, don't you?" Allie cast her a suspicious glance, but kept gripping the arms of the chair like she wasn't leaving Bo. "He asked me to go by your house and pick up your little brother, and then take the two of you to our house. Bo said he's afraid of your mother's boyfriend." I wondered with horror if Bo had spilled the whole story to her. Whatever my mom was starting to look like, she saw some good in him. I figured she had to be blind otherwise. They're looking to detain the kid, and the first thing he wants to say is, "Protect my girlfriend and her kid brother from her mother's pervert boyfriend." "Come on," I told him. "You were coming with me," my mom said. "He's not being charged with anything serious right now, I promise." My mom smiled like she was trying to be nonchalant as she helped Allie up, but I knew her, knew she was thinking that Bo deserved her help. Allie didn't look thrilled, and she was still crying, but she came with us. I followed them out, still not liking my mom's choice of words, not being charged with anything serious right now. And that was Chapter 10 of The Body of Christopher Creed. Thanks for listening.